You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 5th of March 2026 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Chris Chermak. Coming up on today's program.
Their missiles are being wiped out rapidly. Their launchers are being wiped out. They're attacking their neighbors. They're attacking their allies, or not so long ago allies.
U.S. President Donald Trump has won the backing of the Senate. We'll look at whether support for the widening conflict with Iran is as strong as that vote suggests. After that, we turn to Ukraine, which is offering its drone defense services to Gulf nations and potentially even the Pentagon. We'll hear about China's latest 5-year plan and downgraded growth forecasts. And finally, Fernando Augusto Pacheco for the global countdown. How's your Korean, Faye?
Hello, Chris. My Korean is non-existent, but I know a thing or two about the South Korean music charts, and it's not all K-pop.
Well, that's something, isn't it? All that right here on The Briefing with me, Chris Chermak. Very happy Thursday to all of our listeners. Yesterday, the U.S. Senate backed Donald Trump's war on Iran, or at least refused to stop it by rejecting a war powers resolution, largely along party lines. That party line vote was somewhat surprising as the war has divided Donald Trump's Republican Party and even the MAGA movement over the last 6 days or so. Well, I'm joined now by Simon Marks, Washington correspondent and president of Feature Story News. Simon, great to have you back on the show. Only one Republican senator joined with Democrats supporting this war powers resolution that would have limited Trump's war on Iran. Was that surprising?
Well, I think it's not surprising, Chris. I think it was pretty much baked in because the president, any president, after they go to war, and of course this president and his administration say they haven't gone to war, they're engaged in major combat operations. But to all intents and purposes, everybody knows this is a war, and indeed the president slipped a few times yesterday and referred to it as a war. But every president can always use the bully pulpit of the presidency, at least in any conflict's opening stages, to sort of demand backing. And President Trump certainly secured that in the Senate. The vote was 53 to 47. One Republican switched sides. That was Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. Always a no vote when it comes to military action. He's a libertarian Republican. But one Democrat also switched sides. John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, who's very controversial within his own party. So they both cancelled each other out, and that's why you ended up with that 53-47 vote, which certainly over the short term gives President Trump the green light to go ahead and do whatever he wants to do without consulting Congress, even though Democrats are going to continue stamping their feet over that and saying that he is in breach of the war powers resolution that on paper would suggest that he requires at least consultation before these sort of major combat operations take place, and possibly even votes.
Well, Simon, you do say, as you say, this is short term. It's, of course, possible that the Senate comes back to that. But the fact that Republicans backed it at this point, yes, Donald Trump has his bully pulpit. Yes, we are in the early days of the war. Nonetheless, given the controversy around the war, even within the Republican Party, even within Donald Trump's MAGA movement, is there a possibility that Republicans will come to regret backing this war given its unpopularity?
Well, over time, yes, there's no question about that. And for many of those Republicans, the vote was, of course, a gamble. But you know, they're very cognizant of the dangers of crossing President Donald Trump, even at a time when he is being assailed with criticism by members of his own Make America Great Again, America First support groups, including prominent influencers. But equally, those members of the Senate who've backed this, many of them, of course, have significant military communities within their own states, families whose sons and daughters are putting their lives on the line in this conflict. And so for them to cross this president and disapprove of this conflict at this early stage, even if behind the scenes they're talking to one another about an extraordinary set of circumstances in which we were told yesterday by the White House that America had essentially gone to war based on a president's feeling about what Iran might be going to do, does not obviate the sense that Republicans have that for the moment they've got to carry on backing him.
And what about the length argument here, Simon? I mean, Donald Trump is claiming, as we heard at the top, a lot of success here. He said we're ahead of schedule, but he's also said this could go on for quite a long time, maybe even beyond the 3, 4, 5 weeks that was initially baked in. Do you get the sense that Republicans might get wary as it goes on longer? Might the Senate even come back and be willing to back some sort of war powers resolution down the line?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely possible. I will say that successive American presidents have taken similar positions with regard to the War Powers Act, and successive American presidents have also faced sort of grumbling from Capitol Hill, but then inaction in the past. But the longer this goes on, there's no question the greater the risk to the president. And they have been, the administration, all over the map, Chris, on the duration of this. At times we get told things are moving ahead of schedule. The president yesterday saying on a scale of 1 to 10, he rates this a 15. Then we hear that the original plan was potentially for 4 or 5 weeks. Yesterday, the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, said that the conflict could go on for 4 weeks. It could go on for 6 weeks. It could go on for 8 weeks. It could go on for 3. So if you're a lawmaker, never mind a military family, hearing this kind of all over the map spitballing by the administration about how long this military engagement is going to continue, it has to be very worrying.
Well, and Simon, speaking of all over the map, it's not only the timeline of this, but also the justification that frankly has been all over the map. There's even reports, as I understand, in the military that some commanders are invoking a sort of end of times biblical rhetoric that some other soldiers are complaining about. I mean, is that a sign that everyone at this point is perhaps just almost filling in the blanks when it comes to justifications?
Well, the sands of shift constantly with regard to the justification that the administration is offering, including claims, according to the International Atomic Energy Agency, that are specious, that Iran was 2 weeks away from developing a nuclear weapon, and that the United States was in imminent threat of some kind of an Iranian attack. With regard to that sort of religious instruction that some troops say they are receiving, there's an organization here called the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. And as its name suggests, it collects information from members of the military who are concerned that America's constitutional separation of church and state is often breached by military commanders. And scores of them, since the conflict began, have been in touch with the Military Religious Freedom Foundation to say precisely that some of their commanding officers have been saying that this is an effort to prevent Armageddon, biblical Armageddon, from taking place, that this is biblically inspired military action by the President of the United States. And indeed, Pete Hegseth earlier in the week said that he was praying for the biblical vision to make sure that American forces win what is, of course, a war against a theocracy. And those complaints that are pouring into the Military Religious Freedom Foundation are gathering some attention now on Capitol Hill.
Simon Marks, Washington correspondent, president of Feature Story News. Thank you very much for joining us today. Now here's Hassan Anderson with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Chris. Nepal is going to the polls today to elect a new parliament 6 months after a wave of youth-led protests toppled the country's government. Leading the polls is the Rashtriya Swatantra Party that was formed just 3 years ago and has named a rapper-turned-politician, Balendra Shah, as its candidate for Prime Minister. Somalia's parliament has pushed back elections until next year at the earliest, as it voted to change its constitution and extended the mandates for its president and lawmakers by an additional year. Somalia is continuing to fight an al-Qaeda insurgency that has left its central government weakened despite an African Union-led force attempting to take back the country. And Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has spoken before Australia's parliament, calling the two nations strategic cousins as the world order breaks down around them. Carney promised close cooperation on critical minerals, defence and AI. His speech came on the last full day of his visit to Australia before heading to Japan. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks very much, Hassan. Now, with Iran's strikes broadening on the Gulf region, causing no small amount of damage, consternation, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has been offering his country's expertise to allies, particularly when it comes to stopping Iranian-made drones. All that Zelensky is asking for in exchange is for Gulf nations to up the pressure on Russia to come to terms on a peace deal. Well, I'm joined here in the studio by Monocle writer, researcher, and Ukraine expert Julia Jen. Julia, great to have you back on. Welcome.
Good afternoon.
So before we get actually to the Gulf and everything that's been happening there, we do also understand that on the ground or in the war, the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, Vladimir Putin has accused Ukraine of striking an oil tanker in the Mediterranean. What do we know about that?
Yes, so this oil tanker is part of Russia's shadow fleet. This is a way that Russia is circumventing sanctions on its oil and gas industry. And this shadow fleet tanker was in the sea between Libya and Malta, as you said, in the Mediterranean Sea. And it was carrying something like 62,000 tons of liquefied natural gas. So that's quite a substantial load that it had with it. And we don't have any confirmation from the Ukrainians so far. We do have some sort of rumours floating around on the Ukrainian kind of social media sphere. But we from what we understand, it has been hit by a Ukrainian drone, a sea baby drone, supposedly. So these are drones that Ukraine has used in its war against Russia at sea. So Ukraine doesn't actually have a navy, really, to speak of. Its kind of main ships were seized by Russia when Russia annexed Crimea in 2014. But since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, in 2022, Ukraine has really developed a fleet of sea drones that have enabled it to take control of, for example, the Black Sea. So Ukraine now really controls vast portions of the Black Sea in comparison to Russia. So Russian ships can't really venture particularly far out because they are in grave danger to these drones. But we've also seen these drones being used further afield. So, of course, we have this most recent incident, but we've also seen a cargo ship that was carrying Russian military supplies that was hit in 2024 off the coast of Spain. We also had in last December in 2025, we had another shadow fleet tanker, and we've had several countries saying that they won't be kind of collaborating with Russia on these shadow fleet tankers because of the danger that they pose because of Ukrainian sort of attention to them.
And that brings us to the Gulf, Julia, because as you talk about there, the drones that Ukraine has used with success in its war against Russia, and also Ukraine has had some success, at least, in defending against Iranian-made drones or Iranian technology produced, I understand, more in Russia when it comes to the Shahed drones. This is now something that Ukraine is offering its services on. Tell us about that. What is it offering to the Gulf in terms of helping them defend themselves?
So if we start with looking at the drone itself, the Shahed drone, it's a very tricky drone or a very tricky type of weapon because it's not like a big hefty missile or something that sort of is very easy to pick up on radars. You know it's coming. It's a huge threat. These drones actually are not carrying as enormous a payload because their sort of task is to overwhelm air defense, and it's to create civilian terror. And we've seen that through the way that the Iranians have used their Shahed drones on, for example, a luxury hotel in Dubai. That's purely civilian use for this drone. Overwhelm air defense, get through gaps because they're quite small and nimble in comparison to a ballistic missile, for example. Of course, if we actually look at the size of the drone, it's sort of taller than the average human. It's quite a big thing itself. And so Ukrainians have had to really struggle with combating these types of drones. They've been, since 2025, Russia and Iran have been using them to, again, overwhelm Ukrainian air defense how Ukrainians have dealt with them is in two ways. First of all, they started with mobile air defense groups. So these are air guns that are placed on the back of pickup trucks, and you have them being super mobile, moving around in the countryside or in cities and downing these drones over non-populated areas. But that's become more tricky because, as you said, there's a new type of drone that's been developed from the original Shahed Iranian drone, the Garan drone, which is developed within Russia itself, and it's sort of a collaboration between Iran and Russia. And we've seen that combated now successfully by Ukrainians with interceptor drones. So these, big Iranian Russian drones, they cost about $30,000, much, much less expensive than the Patriot missiles, air defense missiles that, NATO and allies have been using to combat them. Ukraine has developed several $1,000, sort of maybe $3,000, $4,000 interceptor drone, much smaller, much more nimble, and they use these to sort of shoot them up into the sky and down these drones. So we have heard from the Ukrainian commander-in-chief, Oleksandr Syrsky, that in the last few attacks that Russia has launched, and there's hundreds and hundreds of these drones heading towards Ukrainian cities at night and in the day, 70% of these types of drones have been downed by these interceptors. And this is a relatively new innovation. And I think this is one thing that Zelensky is keen to share with partners in the Middle East.
Partners in the Middle East and potentially even including the Pentagon in the United States. There's a certain irony there, but tell us about that. I mean, how would Zelensky look at this? Because it is interesting. On the one hand, maybe Ukraine would struggle to produce many more of these interceptors when it needs them itself. On the other hand, when it comes particularly perhaps to the United States, it can get maybe a little bit of a give and take. Is that part of the consideration here? We'll support you. We'll give you interceptors if you give us what we need?
Absolutely. I think there are a few things at play here. I think absolutely, it's in Ukraine's interest not to have the world's supply of Patriot missiles, air defense missiles, depleted. Ukraine needs these desperately, and we have had information from President Zelensky that in the next few days, perhaps in the next day or so, Russia will do another mass missile strike on Ukrainian energy infrastructure and actually, importantly, Ukrainian water supply. Russia has a new goal. They want to sort of stop the water supplies in Ukrainian cities. So there's that one thing. They don't want that to deplete, and they do want to get their hands on more Patriot air defense missiles. But I think also this is about Ukraine stepping up in a really important moment in terms of its soft and hard power, in terms of its diplomacy, and showing that it's a partner. It's a partner that other nations want to work with. Ukraine is shaping its image from being, that faraway country that the US sends weapons to, sort of for free charity, that sort of vibe that was really cultivated under Biden and Trump has really picked up on and really kind of expressed. Now, Ukraine is actually Ukraine has this expertise that it can share with the rest of the world, and it's an equal partner. And I think this is really important in shaping Ukraine's image, specifically to Middle Eastern partners. And of course, we know that they are very much important in terms of the peace talks that happen between Russia, Ukraine and the US. They're important, and we've actually had a prisoner exchange today, 200 prisoners of war being released from Russian prisons back to Ukraine. They are instrumental in those efforts as well, and bringing back home Ukrainian abducted children that have been deported to Russia. So I think this is a very important moment for Ukraine to strengthen its ties there. And I think also, I wonder if there's an opportunity here with, as you said, the US, but I wonder about Israel as well. Israel is a country that Ukraine is keen to cultivate defense tech ties with, of course, because there have been conversations within Ukraine. How can we emulate this Iron Dome that Israel has sort of constructed around itself? Because that's one thing that is so important to Ukraine's survival.
Monocle's Julia Jen, thank you very much for joining us today. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. You are back with The Briefing. I'm Chris Chermak. To China now, which has released a new 5-year plan, and with it, a target for 2026 growth that marks the lowest since the 1990s. I'm joined now for more on this by Jonathan Cheng, the Wall Street Journal's China bureau chief in Beijing. Jonathan, thanks so much for coming on the show. Let's start with the growth target for this year itself. I mean, the last few years, they've been talking of around 5%. Now it's 4.5 to 5%. How significant a drop in target is this?
That's a great question. Obviously, it's a range that's a little bit different from saying around 5%, but it still does have that number 5% there. Who knows? I think we were all surprised by 2025. We thought that the return of Donald Trump to office and the return of tariffs might take a bite out of China's exports and China's economy, but it did quite the opposite. So perhaps we end up with a pretty strong number this year. I don't think that anybody really knows, including China's leaders, but I think they're trying to build in this expectation among its populace, and that's really what this is for. This is really to project to their own officials and to their own people where they see the trajectory going. And you can see there's a little bit of hedging here to have a range of about half a percentage point that it could fall in. We know that this is a target. This is not a prediction. This is really the Chinese government the central government telling its local officials, this is what it's going to be. This is what we need you to get us. So it does suggest some cooling. It does suggest that this is a maturing economy that is plateauing, but also it's not a radical departure from the previous year, although it definitely is. To just have that number 4 there for the first time is really something else when you think that just, 10, 15 years ago, we were regularly in the 8%, 10% and above territory. So this is a cooling down, of course, but not one that was totally unexpected.
You talk about a maturing of the economy. That's certainly one way to read this. I mean, how much will this be seen then as a defeat of sorts, the fact that you're going down below 5% potentially, or is it simply being realistic?
Well, I think it's definitely some element of realism. Nobody expected that China would be able to sustain growth of 10% plus forever. I don't think anyone would expect any economy to do that. There is a natural sort of law of gravity that's in effect here. The other way to look at it, and I think this is the more optimistic spin, you're starting to see it come out from some state-backed commentators, is that the 4.5 to 5% range is less of a cooling off and more of a transitionary kind of a phase here. There's no secret that AI is affecting China just as it's affecting the rest of the world. There's no question that automation, which is taking shape very rapidly in China, is going to mean a restructuring of the economy, of society. It's going to need a lot more humans at work in certain types of jobs. And so I think there is a sense here that definitely things are going to cool down. I think there's an optimism that this may just be a transitionary phase, and maybe soon, maybe they'll be back up to 5 or around 5 again. But of course, all of that remains to be seen. I think either way, I think what they're trying to signal is a certain sense of realism here.
Jonathan, when you talk about something like AI, that does also bring us to the broader 5-year plan. Tell us about that, what's kind of in it, and how it might differ from the last 5-year plan.
Well, yeah, these 5-year plans are a peculiar institution, of course, of socialist planned economies, and you still have this vestige of this, even though China in many ways has become quite capitalist. But we know that this is something that they take very seriously. We know this because you can look 5 years ago and see what their plans were and see that they really did follow through on them, and they really pointed towards technological self-sufficiency, ensuring that China was on the cutting edge of a lot of next generation technologies. They've done exactly that. They've tried to reduce their vulnerabilities to the rest of the world, and they've tried to increase the vulnerabilities that the rest of the world have in relation to them. And what's interesting about this 5-year plan is that it does actually have more continuity to it than change. And I think that that is a reflection of the fact that the Communist Party looks at their last 5-year plan and gives itself a nice big pat on the back. This is mission accomplished in many ways. And why would we want to change when we're on such a great trajectory? So I think we're going to continue to see China try to shore up some of its vulnerabilities, and it still does have many vulnerabilities. It doesn't have access to the very cutting edge of semiconductors, your NVIDIAs and your ASMLs and TSMCs, these sorts of what these companies are able to bring to the table. Aviation and putting a commercial jet like Boeing or Airbus is something else that they're still working towards. But I think there's still a lot of optimism and a lot of work to do there. And I think that they want to continue going in that direction because they look at the fruits that they have so far and they can say, that's what we want. We want more of that.
Well, Jonathan, you mentioned at the start of this exports and that China is holding up surprisingly well despite Donald Trump's threats of tariffs. Given that, and when you talk about continuity in a 5-year plan, I mean, how much is China's economy, its growth, actually in its control?
It's a great question. Exports are inherently going to be beyond the control of China. Certainly, they can make the very best products. They can do what they try to do, which is keep the geopolitical environment as favorable to its companies and its goods as possible. And they can try and price things as attractively as they can. They can do all of that, but they can't force anyone to buy their goods at the end of the day. And if for whatever reason, be it geopolitical or be it commercial, it could be that the rest of the world is going deep into a recession. If that's the case, then even if they wanted to buy more, they couldn't buy more. For any of these reasons, that is an external risk. I don't know that any country, and certainly North Korea is trying, can really insulate itself entirely from the rest of the world and be self-sufficient and have enough going on domestically. And that's especially a problem in China because we know, and the Chinese government itself has acknowledged, that its own consumer spending is not where it wants it to be. And so if you can't rely on your own domestic consumers, and there are a lot of reasons for that we could get into, then you do have to, by definition, have to rely on selling to people outside of China. So that is a risk, and I think it's one that they're very aware of, but it's one that there isn't a quick fix solution for.
Well, that was actually my next question, Jonathan. I mean, this idea of domestic consumption, even if, as you say, okay, China can't be like a North Korea and sort of insulate itself from the outside world, they can boost domestic consumption, or at least in theory. This has been a topic for China for so long. Is there something either in this plan or in the minds of policymakers that they can do to boost Chinese consumers?
Well, they've certainly been aware of this problem for a long time. They've talked about it a lot. They talk about it with increasing urgency. The question is this time going to be any different from the previous times? There is reason to think that perhaps it might be. We are starting a new 5-year plan. The urgency has increased. Even though exports continue to hum along, I think that everyone who is realistic, and that includes the policymakers in Beijing, they know that this may not last forever. They need to have some other sort of engine of growth. So that's weighing on the positive side of things. On the negative side, people are not going to spend money if they don't feel like their wealth is growing. They don't feel like they're optimistic about their own economic prospects. If you think you're about to lose your job and you may not be able to get a new one, if your nest egg, which for many Chinese households is their home, is either stagnant in value or perhaps even losing value, then you're not going to go out and spend. And if the social safety net is not there and you don't know how you're going to pay for retirement or how you're going to pay for your child's education or so on, or for your medical bills, then you're also not going to be spending a lot of money very freely. So I think you have all of those factors, and those are difficult ones for any country, any economy, any type of government, whether it be a democracy or a socialist country or anything else. So that's the sort of thing that they're trying to figure out. And I think you've seen a lot of piecemeal efforts. You have these programs that allow for trade-in of older appliances and vehicles and so on, but those are quite piecemeal. What a lot of experts and economists will say is that they really need wholesale reform to the retirement age, to the whole structure of society and how people pay for retirement, how they pay for their medical expenses and so on. But those are very difficult reforms, again, in any country.
Jonathan Cheng, Wall Street Journal's China Bureau Chief in Beijing. Thank you very much for joining us. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. Finally, on today's show, what could that jingle possibly mean, except for the fact that it is this week's Global Countdown with Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Fernando, we already discussed at the top, your Korean is not the strongest, despite the fact that K-pop is leading people around the world to learn Korean right now.
Absolutely. And you're talking about the US, a lot of Americans learning Korean, and actually a lot of Brazilians as well. There's even a reality show on Netflix saying My Korean Boyfriend, which is Brazilian women, deliberately wanting a Korean boyfriend because of their love for the country, the music. So yeah, it's very much on trend. Maybe I'll start my lessons tomorrow.
I mean, it's a little easier if you have a partner to learn the language, I suppose.
I agree. Love is the only way that you can learn a language officially, you know?
Love is the way to learn.
Love is the way to go.
So we are heading with that to South Korea for today's Global Countdown. What's the status? Tell us about K-pop, where it stands right now.
I mean, it's still very strong. Of course, it's not the new kid on the block anymore. You know, it's not a story that K-pop is popular because it's so ingrained in the music market everywhere, you know, in Europe, in North America, in South America, of course, in Asia, in Africa. So, you know, it's there, it's here to stay. So I think we should look out what our South Koreans are actually listening because, Chris, is it just K-pop or not?
Well, that is the question. Is it what others around the world are listening to? Is it different from the K-pop that others around the world are listening to? So what do we have at number 5?
Number 5, a very interesting one because this is a virtual boy band. We'll be talking more about that. They have hidden identities, okay? Number 5, this is Plave with Bong Seung-ah. It's catchy, it's sweet, it's virtual.
What do you mean by virtual? Tell us a little more. We're not talking AI here.
No, so that's a good thing. I make sure to say, oh my God, please, I don't want an AI band. So yeah, they are kind of cartoons. They're cute 5 members of this boy band.
Cartoons, and they don't reveal their identities.
But the voices are real, the musicians are real, but I think, you know, they want to keep it a secret. They want to keep kind of this mystery in the air. And I think they're very business savvy as well, because for the videos, they did a partnership with Sanrio. Sanrio, of course, the company that makes, you know, Hello Kitty and other characters. And they come up in the videos, all very kind of cute, fluffy, pinky, cute. It's cute.
Marketing is such a huge thing in this business. What do we have at number 4?
Number 4, something that is more to my taste. It's a new Korean girl group. You know, they're literally new. They started last year. It's Kiki with 404 New Era.
Now found in the system, for the new era. 점표 바뀌 지점, for the new era. 백지른 내도 백점, for under radar. For now found in the system, for the new era. 404 are the girls to the floor.
I like it. It's very current, But the thing is about K-pop that I find, of course, I think K-pop influenced the music market in many countries, but I think they are also influenced by other countries, you know, the usage of hip-hop, electronic music. So there's quite an interesting kind of mixing of genres there.
It's going back and forth. That's what you want to see.
Exactly, you know, so I like Kiki's latest track.
Okay, Kiki at number 4 might be your favorite. Are there going to be others? What's at number 3?
Well, I am in doubt here because I do love number 3. And number 3, we're talking more about, they're super famous. They've been going on since 2021. You know, and basically I was reading an article about Ivy. Basically it's K-pop's spring comeback. Not that they ever gone away, but you know, we have during this period of March and April, all the big K-pop acts will release new music or projects, including Blackpink, BTS, which we all know.
Which will be going on tour as well.
I mean, yes, a massive global tour. But I love this one. It feels very ravey, but ravey and a little bit of Western influence, you know, the kind of, you will see what I'm talking about. This is Ivy with Bang Bang. Actually, it's my favorite so far, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
We've topped number 4. Number 3 tops number 4. Ivy there. Yes, definitely some Western influences in that one as well.
Yes, I love it. And of course, you know, it's part of the annual Cherry Blossom Battle as well. Who's going to top the charts?
Oh, I
March
see.
and April.
Is this the sort of Christmas number 1 thing for Korea? The Cherry Blossom number 1?
I love that. I mean, I love that.
Every country has their own sort of most important number 1. one.
Of course.
Cherry Blossom number one. Okay, so these are even more important charts for that fact. We're entering March. So what do we have at number two?
Number two, it's a song that I wouldn't describe it as K-pop, and that's why I don't know, maybe I'm wrong on that. But K-pop, of course, I think it's a specific genre that started in South Korea. Very sleek. Usually it's a boy band or a girl band. But I think they have other music styles as well, and I'm very happy to see other genres as well. So, for example, our next singer, Ling Young-woong, he actually won a reality show called Mr. Trot. And Mr. Trot, I'll explain to you. It's an audition show for singers who perform trot music. And trot music is a specific type of Korean pop from the early 20th century, which does have a little bit of foxtrot, some traditional music styles from South Korea. It's usually very emotional. There's a lot of ballads in it. So, South Korea is much more than just K-pop. You will hear the beautiful voice of Ling Young-woong with Eternal Moment.
그런 삶을 사세요. 평범하게 웃는 일상과 사랑하는 사람과 담소도 나누며 남 미워하지 말아요. 삶은 생각보다 짧아요. 이 순간을 영원처럼 살아봐요.
I think it's a nice break from all those kind of sleek, ravey kind of K-pop beats,
It is absolutely a nice break from that. It does beg that question whether K-pop is something that people outside of South Korea refer to as South Korean music, or whether there is, as you say, a genre within South Korean music that is K-pop, and that is not it.
Exactly. So I think people should be more attentive to that.
Be more attentive. Listen to the South Korean charts. Okay, so for the Cherry Blossom starting number ones of the next months or so, what do we have this week at number one?
They are back. It is Plave, the virtual boy band. And apparently, Chris, they go on tour as well. There are a lot of 3D animations. Apparently, it's quite well made. They have a good budget for that. And this song that we're going to hear is called Boo. And I was trying to see what does that mean. Apparently, it's like a light kiss, something. Again, it's
not like our Boo.
No, so it's not. They're not scared. It's not Halloween inspired. It's very cute, romantic, very Cherry Blossom. Let's have a listen.
너를 사랑하는 이유도 아무 이유 없는 기쁨 3 to the 4 그냥 5, 6, 7 1 너를 사랑하는 이유도 아무 이유 없는 기쁨 3 to the 4 그냥 5, 6, 7
More like my boo. This is where we're going with this, isn't it? Yeah.
Very
I'm
light.
getting there now. Very light.
Light kisses, okay? Plave is big. And I've got to be really honest, because I found out about Plave this week as well. So maybe I'm late to this kind of Plave, kind of domination here,
The Plave revolution at number one, kicking off the South Korean Cherry Blossom charts. Fernando Augusto Pacheco, Monocle's senior correspondent, thank you for joining us. That's all the time we have for this edition of The Briefing. It was produced by Angelica Jobson, our researcher was Annalise Maynard, and our studio manager was Christy O'Grady. The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'm Chris Chermak. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.